Fantastic. Fantastic. What an introduction. No pressure on me then. Here we go. Just spotlight myself there. So hopefully you can see me big and in the full window. I present my slides in this sort of way here. So hopefully you can see me, my little face, and my slides, whichever way they are. Come away. Yeah, over there. And I'm going to be talking to you for about 45 minutes to explore the challenges of gender transitioning. And I was saying to your colleagues in the green room before we went live, the reason I'm keen to invest my time in supporting colleagues in the NHS and the supporting organisations is because it benefits me as a service user. I am a transgender woman. I use the services of the NHS and other organisations in the local area. And for me, it's important that I get treated fairly, with dignity, with respect, and also helping to educate medical professionals. I was only in QA hospital this morning having an upper GI consultation with one of the registrars there. And he managed to misgender me twice, very innocently, but I had to correct him twice. So it happens, no matter where we are in the world, misgendering, understanding trans identities and the challenges that we face gender transitioning are dead center in my existence every single day of the week when I'm interacting with people. So that's why it's important. That's why I'm here today, to try and uncover those challenges and hopefully educate you in a way that you can start thinking more clearly about how you could be a better, if you like, professional supporting trans patients and service users. Okay. So that's me, Joanne Lockwood, the inclusive culture expert. Sounds really posh, doesn't it? But my pronouns are she and her. So where are we then? Let's start with why. Why does it matter? I've given you a few things there which I sort of talked about, and I was introduced, and we talk about DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, equality, justice, belonging, all these buzzwords. And we hear them in the media. There's this anti-woke pushback, and trans people are getting too many rights, whatever it may be. A lot of political rhetoric at the moment. So why does it matter? Why does it really matter to you as a professional in the healthcare, or you as an individual in your social life, in society? And what I like to talk about is the output of DEI, if you like, is positive people experiences. If you can deliver a positive experience to all of the people that come in contact with you as an individual and you as an organisation, that's got to be the real benefit we're trying to achieve here. So I'm looking for a positive experience when I interact with you. I get treated fairly, I get treated with dignity, I get treated with respect. You embrace me as an individual, and I know I'm going to get the best service. So that's the ultimate aim of the entire presentation, is to help you deliver positive people experiences, excellent, top-notch experiences to the people that you come in contact with and come in contact with your trust. So let's think about some other aspects of this. I want to start by talking about the who, the what, and the how before we talk about some of the challenges we go through. Because often when we think about, if you're asked to think about an elephant, you all have a different view of an elephant in your head. If you think about a trans person, what pops into your head? Is it a trans woman? Is it a trans man? Someone who's non-binary? We all have a different avatar of who we're talking about. So let's think about that. So first of all, the who, different trans identities. And let's think about the different trans identities that we're going to uncover today. So people who are transmasculine, that's someone who was assigned female at birth, so assigned female at birth. They were picked up by the ankles by the doctor or given a scan, and there was a lack of a penis. Therefore, this person is a girl, is a young girl who will grow up to be a woman. So that's someone who's transmasculine. Someone who's transmasculine, assigned female at birth, their gender identity did not align with that assignment. Someone who's transfeminine, Don picked them up by the ankles and said, wow, you've got a penis, you must be a little boy. So someone who is assigned male at birth and then realizes their gender identity isn't the same as that was assigned to them. Someone who's non-binary, and I'm not non-binary myself, but the way I'm told people would describe it, I call it like agnostic, gender agnostic. I don't ascribe to one gender or another gender, or the absence of gender, a vacuum of gender, if you like, where people aren't subscribing to the social construct of gender. They're kind of stepping back or stepping away from it. And then there are also people who are gender fluid, maybe wax and wane on a daily basis, or depending on what they're doing. Maybe it's enforced fluidity where they work in an organisation that's not supportive of them, so they can't fully transition. Maybe their family life is such, there's so much pressure on them, they have to be mum or have to be dad with their family, but in their private life or in their work life, they can be their true self. So there's different identities we've got to consider. And when we think about this avatar in our heads of who a trans person is, we've got to think about all these different nuances. Each person, whether they're transmasculine, transfeminine, gender fluid, or non-binary, has a different need and a different way that they want to be treated, their pronouns, the language they use, and they'll all have different life challenges as well. So let's layer on top of that. So we've got the how, the what. So the complexities of those identities. If we think about those various identities here, then we'll add another dimension on that, the complexity of that. So we've got age as our first, if you like, complexity. So people who are younger, maybe they're classed as maybe a child in their 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. Maybe they're teenagers, maybe they're young adults in their teens and early 20s. Maybe they're becoming adults. The challenges of being trans, being non-binary, vary with age. And it's not saying it's easy when you're older or easy when you're younger, but there are various complexities and the way you're supported. Your sex assigned at birth, so I talked about it just now, whether you're transmasculine, transfeminine, non-binary, that has an implication of how your life experiences, how the complexities of you, whether you're on cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, whether you take testosterone as a trans masculine person to boost your T levels up, to grow facial hair, to bulk up in muscle, to deepen your voice. Maybe you lose your hair on your head. Other things can happen. Or cross-sex hormones as a female, transfeminine person, where you take estrogen, maybe testosterone blockers, in order to feminize some of the appearances you may have, but also to maybe develop breast tissue or other attributes or secondary characteristics of sex. So cross-sex hormones, but not everybody, not every trans person, not every non-binary person, not every gender fluid person will be taking cross-sex hormones. And again, that's very age dependent. It's also, I'm going to put a little dig into the NHS here. Also, there's a huge waiting list. There's a huge gatekeeping that goes on. We've seen the fallout from the Cass report recently about how hormones and puberty blockers must be, if you like, protected and evaluated before they're deployed. And there's a big pullback on this. So there's a whole lot of people out there who are maybe on this cusp of hormones that are now going through a crisis. They're not easy to get. I think the current waiting list at the gender identity clinics is something like 4 or 5 years, and you don't seem to get prescribed hormones on your first account. So you've got to go back, and maybe it can take you 5 or 6 years to even get to that point where hormones can be prescribed. Yes, you can go private, but if you're going through the NHS route, and then some people have or don't have surgical intervention. Neo-vaginas created, neo-penises created, mastectomies, hysterectomies, whatever the definition you want to use medically, there are surgical interventions. Personally, I've had things like hair transplants, I've had laser hair removal on my face, so it's not all hospital surgical interventions. Hair transplants are pretty invasive, and the laser on my face has been pretty invasive. So there are lots of ways people can intervene in their own healthcare, if you like. So hormones, surgical interventions. Of course, not everybody has to do either or one of those two things. And then there's things like legal gender reassignment. So that's driving license, passport, changing your NHS records, those various aspects, or applying for something called a gender recognition certificate, which it takes about 2 years. You have to have an eligibility requirement of 2 years. And then you have to provide a lot of evidence that you send it off to the gender recognition panel. They decide whether you're good enough and send you back a bit of paper that allows you to get a new birth certificate. That process of the gender recognition panel, it takes a minimum of about 30 weeks at the moment. Mine took a bit longer because they said the evidence I provided wasn't quite good enough, so I had to resubmit. So mine effectively took about 10 months in the end. So it's not a quick process. Even after the 2 years, you have to wait. So again, people in your care, people you may be dealing with, may or may not have hormones, may or not have surgery, may not have legal gender recognition, or they may be taking puberty blockers, or they're different sexes on at birth, or non-binary. You can start to see these multiple dimensions now of each individual and the complexity of their identity and how they're treated. So let's layer another thing on top of that, where we have to think about not everyone's going to share who they are. I've got many friends who are trans, non-binary, who don't want to go into detail about their history and their background, their trans history, if you like. People aren't always comfortable to share because, as it says at the bottom, there's a lack of trust. Can I trust me and my identity and my needs with you as a person? Are you going to treat me fairly, or are you going to discriminate, or are you going to be biased against me? So we've got to be really, really understanding here that not everybody wants to share. I'm quite happy to put female on a form, but if you want to get more invasive than that, I need to know why it matters. Why does it matter? And of course, I mentioned here the waiting times, the complexity of experience, the disparity of experience that many people find approaching the NHS and other service users. We think about primary care. There's a huge variability in delivery of trans care at the GP level, at the primary care. Sometimes it's postcode lottery. Sometimes it just comes down to the GP you're seeing. And I've seen lots of people online talking quite recently how many GPs are now writing to trans patients, saying they're no longer comfortable prescribing hormones, cross-sex hormones, HRT, and certainly even puberty blockers, which we know through the CASH report. So there's a huge disparity of the experience. Personally, I've got a fantastic GP, and he's looked after me really, really well in the 8 or 9 years that I've been seeing him, and he's really supportive. But my experience is not common across the board. So we've got to recognise that people who are coming to see you may have a real lack of trust because of the disparity of experience they faced. So we add all those permutations together, and you can see we're now developing this 3-dimensional cloud where no one person is typical. There's so many different complexities in there. And let's add another bit in here, the holistic, the intersectional approach, recognising that there are other categories and other things about people's identities that sit within that. But what we've got to strive for, I said right at the beginning about positive people experiences. That's what we're trying to achieve, is it not? We want everybody who comes into our care through our service to have a positive experience. That's what we're trying to do. So it has to be inclusion at the heart. That's what we're looking for, making sure everybody feels. I use the word feel because I believe that inclusion is about a feeling. How do I feel? So I would encourage you to think about the language you're using towards people. A bit like the registrar I saw this morning misgendered me very innocently, kind of mistake. I appreciate my voice isn't in the typical female range. It's who I am. So it's really important that you read the notes, you appreciate who sat in front of you, and check if you're not sure. Could I just ask your pronouns? Could I just, my name is such and such, my pronouns are. Could I just check yours? Not to be specifically pulling somebody out of the crowd and highlighting a difference, but if you're open on your badge, hello, my name is, and my pronouns are. Maybe you can record it on the system, someone's pronouns. So, but again, we need to make sure the language is reflective. And I know there's some big shock horror Daily Mail stories about erasing the word mother and calling everyone birth givers and people who menstruate and all this thing. So we've got to be careful that we're not going overboard here. I'm a great advocate for what I would call additive language, and I'm not sure if that's a real word, but a language that adds. You're a mother and a birth giver. You're a mother and a parent. So we're using words not to other somebody, but we're trying to create this additional language so that no one feels excluded. And we're going to start looking at the unseen. We hear people looking at the Daily Mail, the GB News crowd saying, why are we asking men if they could be pregnant? Well, trans men could be pregnant. So we have to check that we're not having a bias against the person in front of us. I see a man with a beard who looks like a man, who sounds like a man. How could he be pregnant? Well, he could be. So if we're going to do x-rays, we're going to do blood tests, we're going to do other things, we need to make sure we're drilling into that. Again, recognising that person may not want to share who they are. So we've got to have a sensitive approach. We've got to realise that everyone's packaging is different. And I was doing a talk recently about trans inclusion for menopause. And a lot of the products that we talk about, and a lot of the language around menopause is very feminine orientated. A lot of period products are pink, they're very feminine coded. So we've got to be careful sometimes if we're trying to ensure that people are non-binary, people are transmasculine who need that support for menopause, need that support for period products and menstruation, that we're making sure the packaging isn't all pink and fluffy. There are neutral options available. Making sure the toilets, the male toilets, the female toilets, the gender neutral toilets, all have sanitary disposal, all have opportunities to buy period products from the vending machines, whatever they may be. So again, it's thinking about that inclusion at heart, because you don't know necessarily who's in front of you, who's accessing your service, whether it be a patient themselves, be it a family member, being a worker, a contractor, or even a member of staff. So we've got to be thinking about all these different dimensions that I've just talked about, and how do we create that inclusion. So that's kind of the challenge I'm giving you today, is how do we blow our minds here and start drilling into the complexities. Okay, so where are we now? Different phases and different needs. So as I mentioned, I gender transitioned back in, I'm going to say 2017. I started on cross-sex hormones in around 2016, in the middle of that year. So coming up for eight and a bit years. And I had different needs over that time. So pre-transition, from about 2012 through to 2017, 2016, that was pre-transitioning. I was questioning. I was attending support groups, local support groups, the Beaumont Society and other organisations host support meetings for trans questioning people in the south of England, and the Beaumont Society and other organisations around the country as well. So I had different needs at that stage, in that 4 or 5 years. I was just starting to embrace who I was, trying to figure out who I was, and trying to work out if this, take it for a test drive if you want. Try the shoes on, try the coat on. Does it work? Does it fit? Is this me? That's that questioning phase. And I would say most people who transition in the end go through this phase where they're trying to figure themselves out. So again, you may be meeting people coming through your service who are in that pre-transition phase, and their needs are different. Very vulnerable, very curious, very unsure. And then maybe one day they think about, hang on a minute, I want to come out, I want to be open to my family, to my friends, or even just a small select group of people. Whether that's a trusted group on the internet, whether it's a support group, whatever it may be. So that's the first aspect of being seen as you. And that can be a really, really stressful time. The fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, or the imposter syndrome going on, that kind of anxiety about going out in public, that anxiety about meeting people, being judged, being rejected, being discriminated against. Your first example maybe of being in a public place, feeling very nervous, very insecure. So that initial, I always describe this as the kind of the vortex. You've gone from your safe zone, your comfy living room, and you've opened this vortex, and it's noisy, it's windy, everything's spinning around in your head, and there's two doors. One is out of the vortex going forward, and one is retreating back into your comfy space, your safe zone. And sometimes people get stuck in this vortex. They get stuck in this mindset where I don't know if they should go forward, they don't want to go backwards, they don't want to go forwards. So it's really important to, again, when you see people, working out where they are, and that's coming out, being seen, and then commencing the transition phase, walking through that door, taking that first step, coming out to yourself. And I think that's the hardest bit, is coming out to yourself as a trans person. I had to go through this real challenge in my head. Who am I? Am I trans enough? Am I really doing this? Does it work for me? So that coming out, being seen, to commencing my transition was a real tumultuous time. And eventually it was a case of just jumping off the log and realising it wasn't a cliff edge. It was just a couple of inches, and it was okay. But that's the point here where we end up with our family. Maybe if we're married, our spouse, maybe we've got children, our children, our siblings, brothers and sisters, and non-binary people, our nibblings, cousins, nephews, our wider circle of friends. All these people are now judging us, or we're feeling very judged. And I often say to people that transitioning for me was relatively easy because I'd been through these stages and I kind of knew who I was. So the hard bit for everybody else was everybody else had to transition around me. They had to kind of get used to me. And that if you think about a pond, and you throw a big rock into a pond, and it creates these waves and ripples going out. So the people who were closer to me were more impacted by this wave, this pressure wave, this bow wave of the ripples from the rock of me chucking my transition in the pond. And the further people go away, the less impact it had on them. So I had to spend a lot of time with my wife, my children, my brother, my mum, my parents-in-law, my wife's parents, a lot of time working with them to try and help them cope with me. Because I was, 52 at the time. My mum was 76, 77. You try and find literature for a 50-year-old to come out to their 80-year-old parents. The literature doesn't exist. It's all framed in young people coming out to their young parents. So trying to find support. So if we think about this phrase trans adjacent, those are people who are next to me or near to me, that is nearest and dearest, my best friends. We've got to ensure we provide different support to them. Because my wife, it was a big deal. Sorry, that's probably sounded like an understatement. It was more than a big deal. It was life-changing for her and our children. And it took a big mindset leap for them to accept me for who I am. So we've got to recognise maybe the person you're seeing in your care is not necessarily the trans, non-binary person. It could be their wife, partner, husband, child, parent. They may be going through their own mental health journey, their own tragedy, their own loss, their own fear of rejection, their own mental health needs. And I think what it never occurred to me is my wife would have to come out in the same way that gay, lesbian, bi people come out, trans people come out. She had to come out as the wife of a trans woman. And that's something that really didn't occur to me. And our children had to come out as the children of a trans. My mum had to come out as the parent of a trans. So that never occurred to me at the beginning, the fact that other people have to come out. My wife had to adjust her entire sense of self, her own sexual identity, who she was. Was she a straight woman? Was she a gay woman? Who was she? And all of these kind of things aren't necessarily in the handbook that you first pick up. Where am I now? So post-transition, I'm now, 7 or 8 years on. Post-transition, I don't think you ever stop transitioning. There's always a new experience. You're always coming out to somebody new. There's always another challenge. As I said, the waiting list on the NHS, 5 years, 6 years for hormones. If you're looking for surgical outcomes, looking for other interventions, that could take 7, 8, 9, 10 years by the time you've got the health in order to tick all the right boxes for BMI and other aspects, or getting enough people to who have seen you in a time frame to say, yep, you're trans enough, you're good enough. And also the challenge of the family, putting the breakers on, the gatekeepers that assist around you. But I still have challenges as a 8, 9, 10 years old trans woman in that respect. I say coming out every day, still dealing with things, still have medical professionals, still having to correct people, misgendering people, still have to deal with some of the issues that I face. But largely, I'm just getting on with life as a woman. I've got my gender recognition certificate, I've got all of the things, I've ticked all the boxes. So as far as I'm concerned, I've done the heavy lift. But there are still things to cover. So that's kind of the different needs, different phases. So let's move on now. Let's think about some of the toxic stuff that happens. And I want to talk about some of the real challenges, the complexities. I've given you a lot of stuff already. Let me just dive into some more detail here. So we think about these different layers. I mentioned family, we've got friends, we've got our workplace, and we've got society at large. So let me just drill down into each of these for you. And don't forget, after I've done this, we'll have some time for questions, at least 15, 20 minutes for questions to start. Maybe pop them in the chat as we go. So let's think about family, the impact on them, or the impact. So there's an immense amount of emotional and psychological pressure that I faced, that many people face. We hear about people struggling to come out. We see a lot of a rise in homelessness, joblessness, family security, people losing their children, parents breaking up, whatever it may be. We also see rejection, and it is a big deal. It's a huge deal. You are reorientating people's perception of you. There's a myth. People will say, well, you've been lying to us. You've been keeping this a secret. It does feel like you've been cheating and creating this myth around you. And I certainly had that experience for people talking to me. So rejection for the family unit is real, and a lot of people, a lot of people who transition, their family unit does not survive, which is sad, but it's a reality because you are reorientating, and not everybody wants to accommodate that change in you. So again, when we're dealing with people, they may well be in this rejection phase from their family, or certainly in the early stages. There's a lot of coercive control, and I experience a lot of pressure, gaslighting, coercive control, I would say bullying from people around me, wanting me to go back into my box, to limit how I could be me, to put pressure on me, to threaten me and say, well, actually, no, we won't put up with this. You have to carry on being who you were. So that's very real. So again, when we're looking at mental health, our families are rejecting us. They're putting pressure on us. There's immense psychological pressure to stop doing what you're doing. And of course, then homelessness and joblessness will result from that. So we lack this feeling of belonging in our family, the feeling that you're the problem. You've caused this. You're to blame. You're the person. If you weren't being so selfish, it wouldn't be a problem for everybody now. So that's the kind of what's being hit with you very often in many cases. And I'm not saying that everybody has this negative experience, but this can happen in many cases. Let's move on now and look at friends. Very similar. Friends who've known me for 30, 40 years. They were kind of like, it was like, wow, how did that happen? Who are you? I was the national president of a male organisation called the Round Table. And I was national president back in 2008, a man's club. And a lot of people looked at me like I was kind of like loopy. So you were national president of a man's club and you're trans. How does that work? And it's like you can see people, their eyes are tilting in front of me. So yeah, you are going to get people who are going to walk away from you. They're going to go, it's just too difficult. Don't get it. You're weird. Can't handle this. Lack of empathy, whatever it may be. So people will step back, and that's the inevitable. If you think about it, it's no different to changing your workplace, leaving school, moving on from university. You keep in touch with some people, you lose touch with others. And that's what kind of happened to me. I lost a lot of people, but I gained a lot more. And I think the key thing is being able to let go. You get excluded for social occasions. I built up a network of male friends doing male friends things, stag weekends, drinking, pubs. So there's two sorts of exclusion. One is they don't want to invite you. And the second one is if they do invite you, you don't want to go. And I'd say more actually the second one. I don't want to go more than being excluded. I don't want to burden people in their fun, in their times, because I don't have the same things in common that I used to do. When we talk about affinity bias, affinity groups, our close friendships, they're based on sort of lifetimes worth of knowledge and experience. And when you rewrite the rules, it's really hard to rewrite that. And I remember one of my friends said to me, it's really hard to talk to me because we have got no shared lived experience anymore. And we had to find a way to create new stories and new relationships based on the new dynamics of who I am and who they are. And that was a real challenge, but I still exclude myself deliberately and willingly when I'm invited to certain things. A loss of respect. I ran an IT business. I had lots of customers over the south of England, my roundtable network around the world. I lost a lot of respect. I lost a lot of respect in my family, how people saw me. So a lot of friends, I became a joke, and you can never reclaim that. And so, yeah, when we think about mental health, we think about the things that are very positive us. That belongingness, that friendship, those social activities, that getting us out of our home, getting us out doing things, really, really impact mental health if you lose all that overnight, especially when you had a very strong network. So we've got to think about this loss of belongingness, having people around you who are there to support you. And then in the workplace, as I said, I've run my own IT company. I had a couple of co-directors, and I was really nervous. That pre-transition coming out phase. What would my business partners think? And it's a real challenge when you own the business. not only are you, as an employee, if you like, you're almost making it the business's problem. But as I was the owner, I was making it my problem as an individual, but also my problem as the business. Our cash flow, our customers, our turnover, everything was at stake by me transitioning. Will our customers like us? Will our clients engage with me? How am I going to be? With a lack of trust, all these sort of things. Discrimination, bullying, kicking in. So I'm really, really worried about my income and prospects at that point. And that, again, loss of respect. How do people perceive me? We had 20 staff working for us at the time. How would I be treated by people who work for me? Was, again, that loss of respect. Loss of the friendship network, because we get a lot of friendship at work, a lot of social network at work. Many of us meet our partners at work. We hang out, 7 to 10 hours a day at work, if not more. And we build up really deep friendships. And I lost a lot of friends that I had in my workplace, and the social network that came with the networking I did as an IT person, if you like. And so that loss, loss of psychological safety. We talk about bringing our whole self to work. Can I be me? It's not easy to bring being trans into many workplaces, especially when you're in certain environments. And I found that in my environment, that I found I couldn't be myself. There was a huge amount of back pressure to make me conform, to go back to who I was. So again, this loss of belonging, to be a place to be me, to thrive, to earn money, and to put something over my head. And also it impacts the family. If my workplace is at risk. Oh, we've got a heckler in the background. Oh. So we think about societal impact. When I walk out the front door, there's this relentless onslaught on a daily basis in the media, fueled by people with less than positive trans views. We see lots of prominent people putting pressure. We see people in certain right-wing media always telling stories around trans people picking up the negatives. We never hear trans person just got up in the morning, had a great day, went home, kissed their family, went to bed at night, and was a very happy person. We always hear the shock horror. We hear the ones. We hear the confirmation bias kicks in, the availability bias kicks in. We pick up these little stories, but it's relentless. Anyone who's transgender, diverse, or adjacent to people will feel this onslaught on a daily basis. Always something going on, and that's the if you like, the pattern of people who hold less than positive views about trans people is keeping this pressure on to try and almost like erase trans people from existence. Lack of medical and mental health support. I'm talking to you today. The support I get isn't always positive. My GP's been fantastic. The GIC, the Gender Identity Clinic, the wait is horrendous for me and other people. So it takes a huge amount of time, and it's variable, as I mentioned. There's a loss of faith in many government and professional bodies. Who knows about the current government, the previous government? We got to a point where every single day was a bad news story for trans people with the government. The jury's out on this one. We'll see how the new Health Secretary Wes gets on, and other professional bodies like the Equality and Human Rights Commission. But there's a lack of faith by the trans, and I don't like to use the word community because we're not really a community. We're a group of individuals who have a characteristic we share, so not really a community as such. And we have to keep fighting these myths, misinformation, keep having to justify yourself, keep having to have conversations. Everybody wants to have your opinion on something. Everybody wants to question you about trans people in sport. How do you feel about trans people in women's spaces? And most of it is directed at trans women, not necessarily at trans masculine people or non-binary people. It's all targeted often at trans women. So that inevitably feels, again, this belongingness. I'm not only in my family, I'm feeling rejected. With my friends group, I'm feeling rejected. In my workplace, I'm feeling rejected. And in society, I'm feeling all this. So my belongingness, my mental health, my ability to succeed in the world, it's a huge amount of back pressure against me. And I feel that day in, day out. Yes, I've got resilience, I've got fairly good mental health, but it still has an impact on me and others where you feel like you're always having to be on the back foot, always having to defend yourself, always having to have this pressure against you. Then it gets reinforced every time you open the paper, every time you look on your phone, every time you get delivered service by someone who misgenders you. It reminds you that society isn't quite ready for you yet. And that's the challenge. That's the challenge we face. When we talk about the complexities of gender transition, this is where most people feel the complexity. The lack of support, lack of engagement by professional bodies, the misinformation, having to justify your existence, and being in a society that largely rejects you by default, even though there is a lot of love out there. And I'm sure you have lots of trans colleagues yourself, or if you are maybe trans or gender diverse or non-binary yourself, there is a lot of love out there, but there's still a lot of rejection, a lot of nervousness. So the last thing I want to talk about here is in your own mind. We become prisoners of our own internalized transphobia. The imposter syndrome kicks in, the limiting beliefs. I'm not good enough. I've got all this pressure hitting me from my family, from my friends, from my workplace, from society. It's all telling me I'm wrong. I'm not good enough. You'll never kid anybody. Sex is binary. You're either a man, you're a woman. How can you possibly succeed? This is being bombarded in my own mind. It's the impact of what's going on. I internalize it. I start to believe what people are saying. I start to believe that I'm invalid. How do I see the way through? I'm almost like nudging this vortex again, spinning out of control. And it's no wonder people end up having to walk away, or they feel there's no way for them to see through this. It's really, really tough sometimes. Mental anguish, nowhere to turn. And the people who you do turn, is there an understanding about who you are? And I remember my wife, she went to see some counsellor support when we were going through that early stage. And the counsellor, the person she spoke to, started talking her into how she could leave me. Not how she could fix our relationship, how she could stay with me. The default position that she was receiving was how to leave me. So that's the level of support she was getting 8 or 9 years ago. I'm hoping it's moved on. I'm hoping we're more holistic. I'm hoping we're more person-centric to understand what that person needs rather than making the assumption. But it's still there. There's still a lot of gatekeeping, still a lot of rejection out there from professionals. So again, this belongingness. I can't even belong in my own head. I'm rejecting myself. I'm not good enough. Everything's against me. Everyone's against me. So what can you do? What can you do? That's the key thing, really, isn't it? That's what we're here for. Active allyship, as opposed to passive allyship, or just being an ally, wearing the lanyard if you're still allowed to wear the lanyard, wearing the badge. Active allyship. It's about reaching out, understanding the climate, understanding the world we live in right now, the toxicity, the pressure, family, friends, workplace, society, and our own minds. Understanding all of that. Understanding what goes on in the news, what's going on, the pressure that you may not see. You may not see if you're not within the trans community, not non-binary, or you're not adjacent. You may not see that, but it's there. So, as an ally, what can you do? How can you step up and be there? Advocate, call it out, or call it in. So, calling it out is stop. Calling it in is the education. It would be better if. Did you know that language could be, what you said means this? Actually, if you said this, it would be better. So again, advocating, speaking up through your understanding of what's going on in their lives. Recognize the support people need. Engage. Don't assume, though. Don't assume you need to engage me, because I talked about the different stages where I am in my life, post-transition, 8 years on. My needs are different. So you need to engage in a very person-centric way. Recognize the support. Ask, seek clarity, and be there. Stand up against the myths, the misinformation, the BS, if you like, that's coming out of some of the mainstream media that's being amplified day in, day out. Look at what's being said. Look at the motivation behind it. Educate. Be prepared to say, actually, no, that's not right. And if you don't feel confident, how can you become confident? How can you learn about some lived experience, meet some people, understand what's going on, rather than just seeing what you read in the papers? And then most importantly is create an environment where people can belong. I go back to that statement at the beginning, positive people experiences. Create an environment that's positive, not just for me, but for all people, where they can thrive in the environment you create. They thrive in your company. They're not nervous. They can trust you. They can reach out and know they're going to be respected. That's what you can do. I'm happy to open that up to questions now, and thank you for your time. Can I just give a few things to wrap up with before everyone leaves? 1 second. So I've got some resources. You'll get a copy of the slides, the PDF. I've also got some, I call it bonus content, if you like. This slide here is in the slide pack you'll get. Scan that in. I've got some flashcards, check sheets, my Amazon book list. People always ask me for that. My Audible library, so you can listen to that. So see some of the books and things I read, plus some FAQs if you want to get hold of those. The challenge I want to leave you, sorry, I clicked the button there, wrong way, is how are you going to think, feel and act differently? Because we've spent an hour together. I want you to go away and take action. So how are you going to think, feel and act differently? Because action changes things, ACT. So I leave you with that thought. How are you going to take action? How are you going to think, feel and act differently? Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.